In today's political figure episode, it's the guy who answers the question of what type of politician you'd get if you took a picture of Patrick Warburton staring into the sun that had been squished in Microsoft Paint. Give it the voice of Porky Pig, the personality of a 1996 Toyota Corolla, and the type of political ideology that probably has strong opinions about trains being on time. Rhonda Fascist. Ronald Dion DeSantis was born September 14th, 1978 in Jacksonville, Florida, which starts explaining things early. The DeSantis family chain immigrated here from Italy in the early part of the 20th century, and I know you're thinking, well, how could that be with all of his anti-asylum seeking and anti-immigration feelings? Don't worry, he's not a hypocrite. It was different because they were white. He spent most of his childhood in Dunedin, Florida, and graduated from Dunedin High School in 1997. He then went to Yale to study history, I'm assuming so he could figure out how to make it repeat itself. While at Yale, he was captain of the baseball team and joined Delta Kappa Epsilon because, of course, he was one of those insufferable frat boy jocks who nobody could stand to hang out with sober, which tracks with the fact that after college, he became a school teacher and spent most of his free time feeding high school girls alcohol and trying to impress them with the fact that he graduated from Yale. Like a Dollar Tree Matthew McConaughey, and apparently even then the students thought he was fucking lame. After what must have been a soul-crushing year of getting his inappropriate advances rejected by drunk teenagers, he decided to go back to college and get his Juris Doctor. Because if you're already a douchebag, why not be a lawyer? While in law school, he joined the Navy because he heard he had a position where he could be a jagoff, and that apparently sounded appealing to him. After law school ended in 2006, that position sent him to Guantanamo Bay as part of a task force that was supposed to oversee the proper treatment of detainees, which he did by making sure that they were being properly tortured. In fact, DeSantis even allegedly got in on the torture activities, participating in beatings and force feedings. Apparently, it's Italian sausage that's in the sandwiches at Gitmo. It's no homo as long as you don't say gay. After he was done abusing people who couldn't reject him no matter how lame he was, he went on to be legal counsel for the Navy SEALs for a little while. And after that, he went to run for and win Florida's 6th District in the U.S. House of Representatives in 2013. Along with another insufferable jock and student abuser, Jim Jockstrap Jordan, he helped found the Freedom Caucus. He opposed DACA and DAPA and co-sponsored a bill that would have imposed strict penalties on people crossing the border more than once. Because, nothing's better than a fart. Except maybe watching kids get deported. Fuck, he could watch kids get deported all day. Didn't give a shit about your kids. So advocated on getting rid of federal income tax in favor of sales tax because he hates poor people. He also whined and cried that conservatives are victims being oppressed by the IRS because they keep getting caught committing tax fraud, and called for the head of the IRS to step down as a result. He introduced the Let Seniors Work Act that would have gotten rid of retirement incentives for seniors to try to keep them working into their 70s, and voted in favor of a bill that had resolutions to cut Social Security and Medicare while raising the retirement age. He sponsored the Transportation Empowerment Act, which would have shifted most of the responsibility of transportation projects to the states, because when 40 states already can't balance their budget, what could possibly go wrong when states with budget shortfalls just put that bridge maintenance off for next year? And despite being against raising taxes, he voted yes on Trump's Tax Cuts and Job Act, thing that jacked up taxes on the middle class while giving the wealthy massive permanent tax breaks and added a record $2 trillion to the deficit. Good times. Anyway, after 3 terms of fucking things up on the national level, he decided it was time to go back and make Florida shittier than it already was. He ran for governor and he won because it's Florida, and half the population has some combination of dementia and lead poisoning, and a quarter of the population has consumed enough bath salts where they're considering eating your face. And he immediately started wrecking up the place, gutting legislation passed by the previous administration that restored voting rights to felons by only restoring those voting rights if they had no unpaid fines. He did his best to kill off as much of his voting base as he could by making Florida the 12th most infected state with COVID. Honestly, for Florida is probably pretty good when you start comparing it to other things like venereal disease. Also cut Florida's corporate tax rate, got as low as 3.5%, because, taxes are bad and they already don't have to pay any state income tax. He believes that states should take personal responsibility for their infrastructure and things. It should be no surprise that when Hurricane Ian hit, the man who talks the talk went groveling to President Biden and the federal government. He incessantly talks shit about begging for $5 billion in aid. It probably wouldn't have been so bad, but because his policies are so good for big business, insurance companies have been fleeing the state in droves, and half the goddamn state can't even get homeowners insurance anymore. Turns out pretending climate change doesn't exist doesn't actually make it not exist. Who knew? Also, because he's a strong fighter for the freedom of himself to tell other people what they can and can't do with their own bodies and a myriad of other things. He signed a 6-week abortion ban with initially no exceptions for rape or incest. This is even more startling considering Florida has the highest rate of incest in the country. It's a good thing there's no hills in the state, or they'd have eyes. So a major bootlicker shoveling tons of money at law enforcement with like $5,000 signing bonuses because he wants to make sure he funds the police because he needs to be anti-woke and doesn't understand what defund the police means. Also trying to get the Florida State Defense Force reactivated, which has been inactive since 1947. This would be a volunteer military force that would operate solely under the authority of the state government. But hey, what even is a defascist without its own paramilitary police force? He's extensively gutted voting rights and accessibility. Despite Florida having absolutely no sanctuary cities, he passed a law telling the cities that they were no longer allowed to be the sanctuary cities that they never were. He plans to use Florida's taxpayer money to send the Florida National Guard to Texas to help Greg Abbott drown children in the Rio Grande. Of course, this was after he spent a bunch of Florida taxpayer money to charter private planes to kidnap asylum seekers and human traffic them to Massachusetts for funsies. He passed a law banning critical race theory from being taught in Florida schools, despite critical race theory not being a part of any K-12 curriculum in Florida schools. And the reason that he banned teachers from teaching the thing that they weren't teaching is because he didn't want those poor oppressed little white children to feel bad that we've done not great things to brown people. Just to make sure that those poor little white kids never have to feel bad or traumatized about the fact that we did bad and traumatizing things to brown people, Florida schools are now required to teach children about all the positive aspects of slavery. Like how being slaves could teach them skills that they could use in their personal lives that they would have if they weren't property that didn't have personal lives. I'm not even joking. This is real life in Florida right now. Also passed a bill banning teachers and school administration from talking about sexual orientation. Not all sexual orientations, just the ones that make him feel icky. Banned transgender kids from playing sports. He used his political power to violate the First Amendment to pressure the Florida Pension Fund, which holds stock in AB InBev, to investigate AB InBev for putting a trans person on a beer can because it made him feel icky. Then when Disney criticized his Don't Say Gay bill, he used his political power to violate the First Amendment again, threatening to take away their independent district status. And because, he really cares about the safety of the children, he's threatened to build a prison next to Disney World. There's nothing smarter than picking a fight with your state's largest employer and one of the most powerful and petty companies on the planet, and I'm sure that this fight's gonna go real well for him in court. He also passed the Stop Woke Act, which allows white parents to sue school districts for teaching anything that hurts their feelings about history or reality. No joke, they can sue the school district if they teach them that the poor kids in Little Haiti, when their shitty underfunded schools, are going to be statistically more disadvantaged and less privileged than the, white kids in Bal Harbor. Oh my god, there's so much more, but this is giving me a fucking headache. Anyway, the dumbass is running for president now, and it's become very apparent that he is very awkwardly unhuman-like. It's not going well for him. He's burning through cash. He's already replaced his campaign advisor. He is slipping in the polls bad. Despite him being an atrocious human being and a completely incompetent leader, the thing that's probably going to keep him from winning the nomination and the presidency has nothing to do with that and everything to do with the fact that he has got a really creepy, unhinged laugh and kind of gives, giant cockroach in an Edgar suit vibes. Speaking of which, has anybody noticed if he has an affinity for sugar water? On the bright side, at least we'll all probably get to collectively watch him flounder very publicly and embarrassingly over the next 6-8 months, so we got that going for us.